So I would be very happy to have, Colonel, if you have a disagreement with what I said, or if anybody has disagreement with some of the points I've made, feel free to.
Well, Mr. Rohrabacher, I'm actually a long-time admirer of yours for other reasons politically, including some of your stances on immigration, but I would urge you to reconsider your assumption that the government you are dealing with in Baghdad is a democratically elected and constituted government on the Western model. Keep in mind that the vast majority of Sunni Arabs did not participate in that electoral process, and they do not regard Mr. Maliki and his government as legitimate. In fact, they are very, very hostile to that government. The other thing I would ask you to do is, and all members should do this, is look at the current Iraqi constitution. One of the keystones in the edifice of this constitution is the declaration of Iraq as an Islamic state. This is hardly consistent with American English-speaking Anglo-Saxon values with regard to secular democracy. I think if most Americans were aware that we were supporting a government with a constitution that declared itself to be an Islamic state, they would demand the withdrawal of all 169,000 American troops very quickly. There are a whole range of problems. My concern is that you mentioned Charles de Gaulle. It's very interesting. I'm also a great admirer of de Gaulle. De Gaulle was extremely unpopular with Franklin Roosevelt. We didn't like him. We didn't want to deal with him. And ultimately, he was forced upon us by the French people that regarded him as the only legitimate voice. The problem that we have today in the Middle East is not different from one that has existed there for many hundreds of years. If you look at British and French attempts to establish governments, parliamentary democracies, these governments, whether they were monarchies or constitutional monarchies or democracies, did not survive the withdrawal of their forces. I don't think that Mr. Maliki and his government would survive the withdrawal of U.S. forces. My concern is that we come to some sort of status of forces agreement with him, and we are subsequently severely embarrassed because we discover that what we thought we'd signed with him ultimately doesn't have much meaning much beyond the green zone. And keep in mind that his government has never met anywhere but inside the green zone under heavy American military security. And he doesn't have the ability to authoritatively reallocate resources. We've been very frustrated with the government's pilferage of money and corruption, their mishandling of affairs. We are actually flooding many of the Sunni areas with cash ourselves to compensate for what the government hasn't done, but also to buy the ceasefire that we've had with most of them. These things are not evidence for a modern nation state. We're talking about a traditional society, a tribal society, and it's a very complex place to do business. And my concern is that we sign an agreement that doesn't turn out to be as meaningful as these members would want it to be, if we in fact sign such a thing.
If my friend would yield for a moment, just one moment.
All right.
I also think it's important to note that when the request for the extension of the UN mandate was made by the Maliki government, it was represented to the Iraqi parliament, the so-called Council of Representatives, that their consent under the Iraqi constitution would be secured by the Maliki government. The Maliki government reneged on that promise, that pledge to the Council of Representatives. We raised that issue. And there was a letter that is in the possession of this committee that was signed by 144 members of the Iraqi parliament that was forwarded to Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and to Secretary of State Rice, that they objected to the extension of the UN mandate unless a timetable for withdrawal of American troops was made part of that extension. Now, it concerns me that given that apparent violation of the Iraqi constitution by the Maliki government, and I'm aware that there have been pledges made by the Maliki government that on this occasion they will respect their own constitution and will not enter into this bilateral agreement, whatever form it should take, upon expiration at the end of this year of the UN mandate, that they will secure the consent of the Iraqi parliament. And by the way, that requires 2/3 of the membership of the Council of Representatives. So to me, that was a very undemocratic act for a government that we are heavily invested in because of the policies of this administration. And I yield back to the gentleman.
Let me just note that I find that criticism of specific criticisms of the government of Iraq, or even our own government, in times of great peril and turmoil, not to be what I would call nitpicking. And I'm not saying that too much of a pejorative way, but or a dismissive way. But let us note this: that at times, historic moments, when you have monumental things going on, we are trying to determine not only the future of Iraq, which is itself an important country, but also the future of the region. And we realize that radical Islam will either dominate that region and dominate Iraq, or some other form. Now, whether or not Maliki and his government and his constitution is in some way reaches the threshold of unacceptability, okay, we can talk about that. But do they have imperfections? The answer is absolutely yes. And there's been no government that I know of that's ever been in a moment of turmoil, of historic decision-making, that has not been imperfect, and imperfect in some very definitive and very observable ways. But that does not mean that we should just let history go in the opposite direction then. If there is a chance that Iraq will be a more Western-oriented society, it will be because of what we do and what we have done, and the decisions we make as to how we will extricate ourselves from the conflict that currently is going on, either in a way that leaves the door open to radical Islam, or whether or not we leave in a way that leaves behind the possibility that the people of Iraq can live in a somewhat Western society, if not imperfect. So while conceding perhaps specific points about imperfections or such, and mistakes and actually decisions and policies that we disagree with, that should not blind us to the fundamentals of what's going on here and what will be the product of our demand for further, a more perfect situation.